Hey, welcome back to the Football Die podcast with the three of us back together again. Three's obviously the magic number at the business end of the season, bringing the big guns out. How are you guys? Good to see you both. Nice to actually see you do the podcast in the last few weeks of my absence. So cheers for that. Myles, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good. Thank you, man. Even though my season's kind of petered out to nothing, not really watching Villa do much. And to be honest, I'd probably be quite happy if they lost both of their next two games, but I'll explain why later, I'm sure.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's bleak. Yeah, do you know what? If anyone's going to relate to wanting the season to be over, it's me and Dave. Dave, how are you, man? You all right?
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah,
Good.
we've wanted the season to end since about halfway through the season, haven't we?
Probably, yeah.
Halfway through, you still had some hope, yeah.
I don't know. When Solskjaer was in charge, it was a bit grim as well, but it's actually got worse. But yeah, let's not dwell on United anymore. I think
Didn't
we've
even
done
play
this
this
season now.
weekend.
I know, dominating conversation still. What will dominate conversation is the FA Cup final, obviously. That was a tense affair, wasn't it? Quite exciting, quite lively, and another 0-0 to show for it after 90 minutes. But Liverpool win on penalties. The first time that Klopp's lifted the FA Cup, isn't it, under Chelsea? It's the final one in his trophy collection. So something for them to celebrate. But Chelsea, third cup defeat in a row, third cup final defeat in a row, which is gutting for them. What a way to lose. I mean, it was incredible to see Edouard Mendy save the penalty from Mane, wasn't it? His bloody Senegal teammate. And you thought then maybe the tide's turning. But Myles, as soon as Mason Mount missed that penalty, you just knew, didn't you? It was just set up for Liverpool to take it.
To be honest, we just all save ourselves some time and go back and find the episode we recorded for the Carabao Cup and cut and paste a few things in from that, because it was just like watching the same game again. I do feel for Mason Mount. That's the added change this time, because he's obviously progressed amazingly over the last few years, but just seems to have this Wembley hoodoo that he can't get over. And sadly, it was his penalty in the end that kind of settled it for Chelsea. Not to forget that Azpilicueta missed one too. And you'd imagine their captain to kind of be the reliable one there. But I didn't feel very confident when he stepped up, and clearly neither did he. So
how many times is it he's lost at Wembley or in the final, Matt?
It's his sixth one now. He lost. I'm going to remind you of the first one because it's brilliant. He lost to Villa in the playoff final when he was at Derby. He's now lost 3 FA Cups and the Euros and the League Cup, isn't it?
That's really bad luck, isn't it? It's shocking bad luck.
Yeah.
And do you know what? The penalties were odd because there was a few takers. I was thinking, why is he taking a penalty in that order as well? I mean, Azpilicueta, I know he wants to go out on a high, but why is he taking a penalty when he did so early in the running order? It was mental, wasn't it? But then why is Mane taking a penalty against Mendy? He must have seen him take penalties so many times over the last season. I just don't understand it. But it's Liverpool's trophy, Dave. How are you feeling about that? Second trophy of the season out of a potential quadruple. What do you reckon? Is it on?
I hope not. But
I'm going to interject there, though, Dave, because I mean, you've got to give credit where it's due. They've been brilliant this season, Liverpool. I said at the start of the season, I think we all did, fourth place was as good as it looked for them. But they've surpassed all expectations, and the potential disruption of the Africa Cup of Nations hasn't done anything to them, really. So you've got to give credit where it's due, surely.
Oh, yeah, and I think the additions that they've made in the window has definitely helped. I feel as though Luis Diaz has stepped up when he's needed to and provided some important moments, some good goals and some assists. And it's what we've seen all the best teams and over the years. They've had depth in those match-winning positions, up front and in defence. And the additions of Konate and Luis Diaz have been like 2 really, really good additions for them. It hurts to say, but I think we all think they're going to be favourites in the Champions League final. Real Madrid have obviously, they've come from behind so many times this season, and we're just kind of waiting to see when. We won't say luck, but they've had a little bit of luck here and there. But is it going to be one step too far for them? I don't anticipate that Man City will lose or drop points against Villa.
Wow, we'll talk about that in a moment, but that's a bold statement, Dave. But I think the quadruple is still on. Obviously, we'll talk about the Premier League in a moment and Man City losing points to West Ham. Deservedly, it has to be said. But the FA Cup final, Myles, what did you make of this 0-0? Like you said, copy and paste of the Carabao was pretty thrilling. The margins were so fine again. I think even Jurgen Klopp said if Chelsea had won it, he couldn't have had any complaints. Who was the better team in the 90 minutes, do you reckon?
I'm not even sure I could pick a better team, to be honest. It was very even, as these two sides have been pretty much every time they've met this season. I think it lacked a clinical nature from Chelsea. Obviously, Lukaku's had a very indifferent season, and really this might have been his moment to come to the forefront and take a trophy for Chelsea and really cement that number 9 role for next season, because there is some uncertainty over that with Havertz in that kind of area and Werner still around as well. I thought it was very odd, by the way, that Werner didn't get on the pitch. Really looked like they could have done with him. And Pulisic, honestly, I think he's a Liverpool fan. He couldn't hit the goal. He missed the target every single time he had the chance to probably give Chelsea the win, because it looked like it was only going to take 1 goal. But no, I think Liverpool played very well. I think it was a brilliant performance from Trent. I thought he looked really, really sharp. Yeah. He defended well. He read the game really well. And I think their midfield was strong, considering they were missing Fabinho, and everyone kind of earmarked that as a potential weakness for them and where Chelsea could maybe have some joy. It didn't seem it at all. And it shows how well Klopp's done at bedding in players like Thiago. I think last season, none of us were particularly overwhelmed with Thiago Alcantara. We all expected a lot from him and maybe didn't see it. And then this season, the dynamic he's developed with Fabinho and either Keita or Henderson or Milner or Curtis Jones on the odd occasion seems to be a lot more fluid. And again, Liverpool, I just thought managed the game very well. It was a fairly good 0-0, but I just think both teams lacked that final bit of quality up front, and you don't really expect that from either side. Maybe if Salah plays more in the game, Liverpool are a bit more clinical. Maybe if Werner or Havertz had been on the pitch for Chelsea, they would have been a bit more clinical. It's hard to say.
It's a strange one because Liverpool hit the woodwork so many times, didn't they? So they could have, they were inches away from actually getting a goal in normal time. And like you said, Luis Diaz was great. He's really exciting player. Like he's been there. It looks like he's been there for the whole season, but you forget it's a January signing. So Liverpool scouting has paid off again. They've done really well in the transfer market. And I think that's what is the difference between them and a bigger spending team, is that they're scouting accurately. They can't afford to make mistakes, and they get it right most of the time lately. So, hats off to them.
That's really funny as well, because actually not that long ago, you would have said that Liverpool signings were the thing that were letting them down. If you think about when they sold Torres, obviously they brought Suarez in, but they spent that money on Andy Carroll. They've had some very odd midfielders come in over the last few years. But since Klopp's come in and kind of taken a bit more charge of those areas, Liverpool's investment over the last 5 years, let's say, incredible. If you look at the money that they spent on the likes of Mane or Salah or even Firmino, obviously he was a bit before that and he's sort of starting to fall a bit behind the pecking order now. But Jota, were any other elite clubs coming in for those players at that time? Well, probably not. But somehow they've become the most wanted prospects in football. And I think that there's got to be a lot of credit for the business Liverpool have done, including Diaz, as Dave says, and Canate. Looks like he's fitting in really well. It's just going to be interesting now to see how much the Liverpool squad are ready for the Champions League final, because it didn't look good, did it? Alisson obviously had a knock in the first half. Fabinho wasn't there. Salah went off. Van Dijk went off, although that might have just been fatigue. It's going to be an interesting end.
Yeah, they're limping towards the quadruple if that's what they're aiming for. It's testing the squad to the limit, isn't it, really? Dave, a word on Chelsea, if you can. Their 3rd FA Cup final loss in a row. Sounds horrible to say. For the players that have been involved in all 3, that's a crushing feeling, surely. And Mason Mount must feel absolutely terrible. Where do they go from here? How do they evaluate their season? Because we had really high hopes for Chelsea. And this has to go down as a huge failure to not come away with a trophy and potentially lose 4th place at one point. It looked like they were, sliding down the top 4. Are Chelsea going to look back at this season and go, yeah, we did okay considering everything we've been through?
Yeah, and it was a case of deja vu again, I feel, in this game. Like Mark's already said, it was very similar to the Carabao final. And I was surprised that Lukaku played, to be honest. Particularly as some of the gilt-edged chances that he did miss, I think it was particularly in the first half. We saw him miss chances against Real Madrid. So, and obviously that came back to came back to haunt them, in that they just aren't taking these chances. And in these big games, when they're such, games are decided so kind of in such tiny, small moments in games, it can, really determine a win or a loss. And unfortunately, they just couldn't make those decisive moments happen. And you already mentioned Mason Mount and his look at Wembley. I'm sure he's dreading his next Wembley final, when he hopes he doesn't have to play there again. But they you've got to kind of commend them, really. I think they came into this final on the back of sort of like an indifferent spell. I always felt that they will be able to step up, though. You always feel this Chelsea team, they've got so many good players that you feel as though they'll give City or Liverpool a really difficult game, and we've seen it over the last couple of years. And a Tuchel team is, it's not easy to beat. So I think you've got to give them a bit of praise there, really. I think there's a few players in there, like we mentioned, as a team are coming to the end of the cycle. There's rumours about Conte potentially on the way out. It's been linked with Man United. Obviously, Rudiger's on the way out. Azpilicueta, we don't really know what's going to happen with him. So it's going to be interesting times. And obviously with the club, the future of the club's a little bit up in the air. So I'm sure a lot of Chelsea fans are sort of, probably a little bit apprehensive, really, with what's going on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer.
Well, regardless, I was going to say, regardless of the way the season's panned out, and regardless of whatever happens after this, behind the scenes at the club, Myles, what do they do next? What do they need to grow and to move forward from this season?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It is so weird to even try and analyse where Chelsea are at now, because this season probably is a failure in terms of what their expectations would have been. And look, they were out of the running for the league title before everything happened with Abramovich. So let's not get twisted and say that was the only thing that influenced it. But they will have expected more from Lukaku. I think they put a lot of hope on
I think that's a big worry, really.
Yeah, that was kind of central to their plans, wasn't it? And without that clicking, it has been difficult. They did win the European Super Cup, and they won the Club World Cup this season. They can take that at least as something to try and build on, even if we don't necessarily recognise it as the most monumental win. But I think it's hard to assess what's next for Chelsea, because even with new ownership lurking, there's no guarantee that new ownership will be like Abramovich and spend the money that they were going to. Even if it is someone that is incredibly wealthy, and it's going to have to be to put up the kind of sums that Chelsea require, are they going to want to make the same kind of losses that Abramovich was prepared to take for the kind of other agendas, let's say, that he had on his mind at the time? It's hard to see where Chelsea go, because there's a lot that needs addressing. Dave mentioned then about the end of a cycle for a lot of players. They're going to lose Rudiger. We know that he's going to Real Madrid. Christensen looks like he's going to Barcelona, along with potentially Marcos Alonso and Azpilicueta. So that's 4 key defenders gone straight away. And all of a sudden, the depth they have is Trevor Chalobah, who I think is a very good player, to be fair. And Thiago Silva will be 38 next season, I think. And look, that guy doesn't seem to be aging. He's still fantastic. But after a while, you can't put too much hope in that. And we don't know when they're going to be able to do any transfer visits. Is Malanga going to be their star centre-back next season? Because
I think the worrying thing is let's not be naive and think, clubs stop talking to players when the transfer window opens. There's players will be talking to their agents, and agents will be talking to other clubs now. Just obviously, the season's not even ended yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's the worrying thing for Chelsea and Chelsea fans. Because look, from the outsiders looking in, thinking, the club can't guarantee that they will be able to get this player in here and now, or they don't know when they'll be able to get a player in with the situation they're in. So I think in a way, it's a bit weird saying this, but as a United fan, at least we kind of know the mess that we're in, what we need to, obviously the players that we need in, what players will be already on the way out, and I think there's just so much uncertainty around that Chelsea team, the squad. like you mentioned, Myles, I think Lukaku situation, that's a massive mess again because.
And the other thing is this trophy would have at least given them something to kind of galvanise the group of players that are there. And it is frustrating for Chelsea because actually, I don't think you can say they deserve to lose this final. I'm not saying that Liverpool did either, to be honest. But like you said, it was fine margins again. But at the end of the day, those margins don't matter. It's not measured on margins. They don't have the trophy. So it's such an odd circumstance to find yourself in. Like Dave says, the negotiation process. What players are we seeing Chelsea linked with? We've seen a lot of Chelsea players linked elsewhere, but none being linked with them. We talked before we started recording briefly about some of the massive names that are available this summer. Dybala's said goodbye to Juventus. Lewandowski might be leaving Bayern Munich. Mbappe's still out of contract. Haaland's just agreed to move. Now, a year, 2 years ago, Chelsea are in the conversation for all of those players.
Absolutely.
They're not now because they literally can't be. So those players will all get snapped up in the meantime because Chelsea will be slow to act. And then what do they do? How do they then close that gap between themselves, Liverpool and City next season? Because that's a big gap.
Well, I've got very little sympathy for a team that stockpiled players for years, so they won't struggle for players. They've got Conor Gallagher still on their books. They've got Armando Broja still on the books. They've got some quality coming back into the team. So I won't lose any sleep about Chelsea being able to field a decent team. They'll still compete. But the point stands. They were European champions. They still are, but not so long ago, they were lifting the trophy. They were the pinnacle of European football. And with Tuchel in charge, they did look kind of unbeatable, didn't they? They had an aura of invincibility about them. They started the season really well. We were doing a podcast saying, wow, Chelsea look ominously good. This looks impressive. And it didn't take much for that to sort of be disrupted, did it? And acquisitions like Lukaku, I think, disrupted the dressing room massively. I don't know how much input Tuchel would have had in signing Lukaku, but it doesn't strike me as a Tuchel signing, to be honest. I think he needed a different kind of forward player. So it's a bit of a square peg in a round hole there, he seems.
Well, it didn't seem it at the time, though. A lot of us earmarked him. Well, I didn't. You two earmarked him as Golden Boot winner this season.
Yeah.
And I did say I thought he would do really well at Chelsea because he's done well in the Premier League before. He had a point to prove after his time at Man United. His game had come on massively since Inter Milan. But he just doesn't seem happy there, which is bizarre because this was his dream move.
But that's the thing. I think it's all about the character of the squad to make Tuchel's team work well. And that's why I'm thinking maybe Abramovich wanted to bring Lukaku back to the squad just out of sentimental reasons, coming back home to Chelsea. They made a pretty big deal out of it, didn't they? So did he fit the quality and character of the team that he was building? Definitely not in hindsight, but hindsight's a beautiful thing. Looking back, he looks like fish out of water there at the minute.
It's been there for him to score the goals. The top scorer, Mo Salah's 22 goals this season. I mean, that's not a great deal. Man City, their collection of strikers have sort of spread it out, not scored. And Chelsea, who's Chelsea's top scorer? I can't even think who it is. I bet not a lot.
Could be Man. I don't actually know.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question, David. A good point, to be fair. I'm going to move on to Liverpool because they have won a trophy. It's worth celebrating the fact on their behalf that they've won a trophy. The Premier League beckons next. There's the next leg of their quadruple that they're aiming for. And it's a point between them now. Man City drew 2-2 with West Ham, which was a great result, wasn't it? It was a great... Well, sorry, I'm taking the fact that the game in hand is won, it could be a point between them. At the moment, as we speak, as we record, it's 4. But if they were to win that game in hand, as we expect them to beat Southampton, then that point is now making the final day look really, really tasty. So are you thinking that this is City's to lose now? I mean, of course it is, but they play Aston Villa, of course, which is by no means an easy game. And there's a bit of spice there with the fact that Gerrard's at Villa, the fact that Coutinho's at Villa permanently now, which is amazing.
Yeah, incredible. 17 million.
Yeah, bargain. Absolute bargain. But I'll stay with you, Myles. Your thoughts on the final day of the Premier League, assuming, as I probably shouldn't do, disrespect Southampton like I just did, Liverpool beat them, and it goes to the final game. How do you think it'll play out?
City are going to win it. I'm very confident of that. Villa, for all of their promise and good football at times, they really, really struggle against the bigger teams. I don't think we've taken points from a side above us in the league under Gerrard. Well, no, that's not true anymore because we took a point from Palace. I think the top 8 we've not taken points from. So City will beat us. They don't have to worry about that. There's no quadruple for Liverpool, sorry.
Right, okay. So is it that cut and dry for you, Dave? I was trying to find some narrative where there probably is none. But Dave, is it game over in the title race, or could Liverpool actually pull off the unthinkable on the final day?
I think it's, if Villa are at home, I'd give them 20% chance. But I can't see it happening. Just how good City are as well, and just how they play, they pass the ball around you, they control play. They will wear that Villa team down. If they get an early goal, the floodgates will open, and it'll be an easy afternoon for them. But as time goes, obviously we've seen pressure build, but I just feel as though they've done it so many times in the Premier League over the last few years. They know how to close out this season, and I'm hoping these words don't come back to bite me.
Well, the question I've got for you is, Dave, that obviously it was a 2-2 draw against West Ham, a very good West Ham team. You know, they've put many big teams through their paces this season, and Jared Bowen, once again, was outstanding. But the amount of injuries to their back four is making them look pretty vulnerable at the back, isn't it? They do look vulnerable to counters, to players that get in their faces like Bowen and Antonio did. And I mean, who were they missing this time around? Dias was out, Stones was out, Walker was out. They put Fernandinho at centre-back. What must Nathan Ake be thinking sitting there on the bench, you know, seeing a veteran midfielder take his place in the back four? Surely Ake must start in the final game, really, after that sort of horror show of against West Ham. He looked very vulnerable to pace, didn't he? But can Man City be got at by Villa?
I think, they'll be looking at Watkins to make those runs in behind, and I feel they'll be trying to get Coutinho on ball in those areas where they feel they can hurt City. But it's just, I feel as though, you know, how many times have Man City lost 2 games or dropped points 2 games in a row this season? It's not. And the thing is, Pep will be looking at the areas that, you know, they just didn't perform in. Zinchenko probably had the worst game for Man City. He was probably at fault for those 2 goals, and just kind of how he had such a lack of discipline in his positioning. He just let them, you know, get in behind, and it was so easy for West Ham. Particularly that goal on half time was so crucial, because you felt if it went in, you know, one behind, you thought, you know, that's come back and they can still win this game. And you still felt that 2-0 down, but. Yeah, you might be right. You might be right then that Ake could start in place of Fernandinho. It's looking like it's going to be Fernandinho's last season as well. So I just feel as though them being at home, I feel like as though the pressure won't be on quite as much as it was in that game. I think that was the big one against West Ham. And if they'd have lost, you know, it could have been a last day shootout in goal difference. So I'm sure they'll just be thankful that they got the point in the end.
Well, they were lucky not to get the 3 with Riyad Mahrez missing another penalty. He's had a sketchy penalty record this season so far, hasn't he? But Myles, I'll go back to the Villa point. I can honestly see a bit of spice there. I can see Gerrard being pretty up for this. You know, he could actually win Liverpool the title for the first time, not even being a player. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what it is? We actually put in a really good performance against Liverpool midweek last week. I thought we looked brilliant and probably deserved something from the game. And I was so desperate for us to derail Liverpool's title bid, partly because I hate Liverpool, but mainly because I'm tired of could Gerrard win Liverpool the title narrative? I hate it. He's Villa manager. He's trying to get Villa into the top half. He's not trying to win Liverpool the title. So I kind of wanted us to beat Liverpool and then get spanked by City on the last day of the season, just to shut people up a little bit. But no, I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't mind seeing us lose our 2 games. I'm obviously kind of joking, because you never want to see your team lose. But Villa are away for absolutely nothing now. I don't want Liverpool to win the league. I also don't really want Burnley to get relegated, because I would love to see Everton go down. So we've got Burnley this week, and then City on the final day.
Blimey. Talk about influencing the top and the bottom.
I think you mentioned there about Gerrard and, you know, wanting Liverpool to win the league. I actually feel like he was genuinely really aggrieved not to get something out of that game against Liverpool. You could see it, and you could see it in his post-match interview when he was asked about John Moss, and his performance on the pitch and his comments on when he said, "Oh, he's retiring at the end of the season," and he was like, "Is he good?"
Good.
Pretty blunt, wasn't he?
Just quickly, I know you mentioned it then, but I do want to just have a quick moment while we've somehow strayed to Villa, that getting Coutinho on a permanent basis means a lot for next season, I think. Gerrard mentioned in an interview the other day that when they were in talks with Luca Dean, one of the things he asked was, how's things progressing with Coutinho? And vice versa. And it is true, when you're trying to bring in a bigger player or you're trying to up the profile of your squad a little bit, they want to see that it's there. They want to see something's being built. And Villa are being linked with some very big players all of a sudden that don't seem possible. The biggest one I keep reading, and if somehow Villa pulled this off, I'll be ecstatic, is Jonathan David.
Yeah, impressive.
Amazing signing that would be. Looking at him, Kamara from Marseille. Villa all of a sudden could be a bit more influential in the race for a few things next season, and actually because they're competing in it rather than they're just going to get battered by the teams that are competing. But no, City have won the title, and it's gutting that Grealish is going to win the Premier League against Villa. But hey ho.
I'm going to disagree. I'm got this horrible feeling that they're going to mess up, and I think Liverpool will snatch it, and they'll absolutely revel in it, and we will feel absolutely horrendous, and they'll win the quadruple. I'm obviously got this sick feeling in my stomach that it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't, because it'd be unbearable.
I'm quite sure Real Madrid are going to win the Champions League as well. I'll be honest. I'll say it on the podcast. I'll be the guy that goes against Liverpool. I'm recording. I'm quite confident Real Madrid are going to win the Champions League. I just think that they've talked about it being that they've overcome a few things and got a bit of luck and stuff. I just look at it as they have got this competition. They know this competition. They know they are never beaten, and they own it. And I honestly think, particularly if Liverpool's injuries don't clear up and they're without Fabinho, and if I don't know what the verdict on Salah is. Have you guys heard anything?
No.
I think the last time that one that does actually give me a little bit of hope was the last time Liverpool came up against Real Madrid. I think Vinicius tore them to shreds.
Potentially. I mean, Benzema's the key, isn't he? Come on.
I think that will be a key area where they can take advantage of that. Liverpool get high up the pitch and get Vinicius on the ball when he's in the mood, and he'll be able to hurt them. Him linking with Benzema has been a joy to watch this season. So,
yeah. We will no doubt wrap up the European tournaments as and when they arrive on the pod. But we'll go back to the Premier League now for the weekend's games, and they all played together on Sunday. And there were some obviously very routine victories, routine games, a lot of teams on the beach, but still plenty to play for. And the relegation scrap still has a lot of question marks. There's still a couple of teams with an extra game in hand to play. Obviously, that counts for very little any time this season. We've seen that plenty of times with Burnley this season, haven't we? But Everton lose to Brentford, capitulate, get 2 players sent off. All of a sudden, their last 2 games look very tricky, and they're not out of the picture yet. I thought they'd put together a very good run of form and were out of the woods really for relegation, but no, there's still so much riding on the next 2 games. Clearly, Leeds are in deep trouble. They scraped a hard-earned point, really, didn't they? So they're still fighting, but it is still very much a fight. And Burnley, I've got 2 games in hand over both, a game in hand over both of them, and 2 games still to play. So the permutations are confusing as to who could get what. It depends on the opposition, who turns up on the day, who's up for it the most. What's your thoughts, Myles? It's become literally almost a neck and neck tie, isn't it, for the last couple of games, which is amazing for the neutral, but for every single fan of each of those clubs, it must be absolutely nerve-wracking.
It's really hard to call now, isn't it? Like you say, I think Everton have got 2 games left as well. I can't remember who one of them is. I know they've got Arsenal on the last day. Leeds obviously pulled themselves out of the relegation zone and put Burnley in it. But Burnley played Villa midweek, and who knows? Because, like I say, Villa are on the beach now. They're not really doing much. And I think the Palace game kind of showed that. And it's nice to see that there is something to be fought for, but it's just hilarious that no one actually wants to fight for safety. Instead, they seem to be fighting for the championship. Whoever has been doing the championship's PR recently has obviously been successful because they all want to be a part of it next season, it seems. Except maybe Leeds, who did actually, I thought they fought really well against Brighton in the end. They obviously went 1-0 down to that Welbeck goal, and then they had a lot of chances to get back into the game. And I'm glad that they got the point. I'm glad that it is as tight as it is now going into the last week, because it should be. We should have something to go for, and there's a lot for these teams to play for now. I mean, Leeds have got Brentford. Now, in theory, Brentford aren't playing for anything. That should be a nice and easy one, but ask Everton if that's the case. It's clearly not. Everton are playing Arsenal, who are obviously pushing for the top 4, and Burnley saw why that was difficult this week when they lost to Tottenham. And then obviously Burnley, I don't know what to make of them, man. I'm worried about them again now, because now they are in the bottom 3. Even with that game, they're the one that's got it. It's impossible to tell. They've got to do it all of a sudden. It's hard.
What's Burnley's last game of the season?
I can't remember.
I think they've got Villa next, haven't they?
Yeah, they have got Villa next.
That's a tough game anyway. And they're at home to Newcastle.
That puts huge pressure on Leeds, that does, if they get out of the...
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is Newcastle. They're at home to Newcastle.
Wow, okay. There's still so many question marks there as well.
Yeah. Newcastle play Arsenal tonight, aren't they?
Yeah.
So Newcastle are going to have a say in both the top 4 and the relegation, one way or another.
Fascinating. Okay, I'm going to press you for an answer then. Who's going down?
Dave, you first.
I just think, some reason, I feel like Burnley are going to go down just because they've lost a little bit of momentum the last few weeks. All of a sudden we thought, Mike Jackson came from, he got a good couple of results. And it almost looked like they built a bit of momentum, and it's kind of just gone downhill a little bit of late. And you'd expect them to get a result against Villa, whether, the minimum a point, they need at least a point. Because they've got so much to play for, you'd imagine they'd be, up for it. But, it's a funny old game, and pressure's off Villa. They'll go out there and enjoy the football. And so I think Burnley will go down. I just think Leeds have managed to snatch a couple of decent results of late. They seem to be, fighting for their lives, as do Everton. Everton aren't as terrible as they were earlier on in the season. So
I think they were this weekend. This weekend, Everton were awful. Absolutely awful. They're defensively so bad without Yerry Mina. They just don't know what to do without him. This weekend, it was like every single one of their players was on a mission to see if they could be the one to send their club down. Coleman gets an own goal. Rondon's tackle was disgusting. Honestly, it looked like something a 45-year-old who'd been out on the lash would do on a Sunday league morning. It was ridiculous.
I think Everton as well, particularly the last couple of games before this one, they've definitely been saved by Jordan Pickford. He's had some really good saves in the 2 games before that, and probably dug them out of a hole. So they can probably feel fortunate to be in the position that they are now. I mean, we'll see, but I think Burnley will go down this time.
What are you saying, Miles? Are you obviously thinking Leeds, I'm guessing?
No, I don't actually think I do think Leeds. It's so hard to call. I can see Leeds winning their last game, to be honest. They've got Brentford last day of the season, and I do think that Leeds as a team, over the last few seasons in particular, have shown a lot of fight. And when they're up against this adversity, I can see Leeds. If Leeds, it comes down to one game, I can see Leeds getting the win. I'll be honest. Then you look at it. Burnley have got Villa and Newcastle. Neither of them are playing for anything. There's points to be got there. They only need 1 point to draw level with Leeds currently, and they've got a much better goal difference. That's Leeds' other problem. They have to win their last game because their goal difference is terrible. Everton, even though they're 2 points above Burnley and there's 2 clubs below them, if they don't beat Palace on Thursday, they're down. I honestly think that, because Arsenal have to win the last game of the season, no matter what. Even if they beat Newcastle this evening, they're going to have to win that last game to keep Spurs at bay. And I wouldn't want to be Everton in that game, although Arsenal showed us that they have it to ruin their own season as well. That's going to be a match of who wants it the most in the least comical way, isn't it? You
don't really know what you're going to get with Palace either. They can turn up and play really well, play the opposition team off the park. We've seen it happen over the last couple of years, get big results against, the likes of Man City, and They've got real potential as a team, so that won't be an easy game.
No, I think Palace are playing for top 10. I think every single
Yeah,
position in the table carries an extra sort of £500,000 to £1 million extra prize money. And Palace will be looking to that and going, that's motivation. Aside from actually saying at the end of the season, Patrick Vieira finished 10th or whatever it might be with Palace against all the odds with a stack of things riding against him. That would have been a massive achievement. So motivation, I think, is there for Palace, whether we admit it or not. We might look at it as a nothing to play for, but I disagree. And I agree with you, Myles. If Everton lose their next game, that is psychologically game over. But then I also think psychologically, the weakest team out of those three is probably Burnley. Without Sean Dyche, I feel like they're not the same team. They're not psyched.
They're better without Sean Dyche. I think they're better without Sean Dyche. I think they've shown that. They weren't that bad against Spurs, if we're 100% honest. They lost to a Harry Kane penalty this weekend in a very, very hard fixture. Spurs are obviously gunning for top 4. They've come off the back of a really good win against Arsenal, who were embarrassing. To be honest, they did the same as Everton and just decided that they were going to be the ones to destroy their own fate this time. They got away with it a little bit, the fact that they already had that cushion. But I wouldn't look at Burnley's last result and go, oh, yeah, that puts them in trouble. I'd rather look at Everton drawing to Watford and think that puts you in trouble. It's difficult. I said I thought Everton would go a few weeks ago, so I'll stick with it for now. It's unlikely with two teams below them because they've got that cushion, and it relies on both of those teams picking up at least one win.
Yeah, it's pressure for all teams, and it's who deals with it the best, I think. And then the fight that the opposition puts up. There's so many different permutations, and there's even the real possibility that Leeds could go down on goal difference as well, which would be actually pretty hilarious, In a season that's not giving Man United fans much, Leeds going down on goal difference would be pretty funny.
Are Leeds at home or are they away? That last game.
I don't know, actually. Good question. Do you think that changes a lot for you then, Dave, if they're at home?
Yeah, definitely. If it's the last game of the season and their Premier League fate is at stake, then 100%.
They're away at Brentford for the final game, so it's a tough one. Might be Eriksen's last game for the club as well. So
I think he's had pretty good talks. Apparently, nothing's confirmed, but from what I read the other day, he said he was considering staying.
Okay. Either way, interesting game. While we've mentioned top 4, actually, Myles, I'll push you for your thoughts on that. So North London derby has happened now. Spurs won the North London derby quite convincingly, thanks to a capitulation.
Spurs win it, wouldn't Arsenal lose it?
Yeah, Spurs coasted to victory. Arsenal handed it to them on a plate, really, didn't they? But myself and Dave were sort of saying Tottenham deserve top 4, but Arsenal are the favourites. Do you still feel that's the case after the North London derby's been and gone?
Do I think Spurs deserve it and Arsenal the favourites? Right. I think Arsenal deserve it, if I'm honest, purely because no one expected Arsenal to be anywhere near the top 4 this season. Maybe you'd say the same of Spurs when you consider it was Nuno in charge when they first started. But Spurs, on paper, had a better squad to start this season than Arsenal did. But Arsenal have continued to develop as a unit. If you look at the signings that they made, I think we on this podcast probably said some of them were absolutely mental. Spending 50 million on Ben White, bringing in Ramsdale after 2 relegations, bringing in a defender from Italy that no one else wanted to look at in Tomiyasu, and they've all ended up being brilliant for them, really. It's a very, very young squad. They showed that youth in the Spurs game because they just didn't have anyone to manage the game properly. And Holding, I don't know what happened to him. Look, he's not the most amazing defender in the world, but what he does do is the basics normally. He's quite calm. So this game, he just seemed too wound. It seemed like Son got in his head, to be honest, and that was it. But I think Arsenal deserve it. Obviously, I want to see Arsenal get it over Spurs, mainly because it will relegate Everton, and that'll be really funny. No, I'm joking. And I think Spurs might be the favourites now, though. Because if you look at it, we talked about games in hand. You'd always rather have the points than the games in hand. And Spurs are currently 4th. Now, all right, you think Newcastle probably aren't playing for much. Isn't that such an Arsenal game to lose?
It really is. Yeah, you're right.
Massively. And then Everton on the final day. All right, I think Arsenal will beat them. But Everton will have something to play for, we imagine, unless they beat Palace. And then in which case, Arsenal can be very, very happy. Spurs have got Norwich on the final day.
Easy. Yeah, you're right.
We said that the other year when they lost 4-0 to Newcastle on the final day, didn't they? So who knows?
This is a different Spurs. That's what I mean. The Antonio Conte team is so different to the Nuno team. Is so different to the Mourinho team. Yeah. He's leveled them up, and I think as a management appointment, he's absolutely spot on. I think he'd have actually got something out of this Man United squad if he was appointed when he was. I think that now is kind of proving beyond doubt. He's made Tottenham suddenly look like contenders again for trophies. You can see them kicking on next season if he stays there.
Well, they should be.
Yeah.
If you look at which squad would you rather have, Tottenham or Arsenal's?
I think Tottenham's needs more work, though, to be fair. Arsenal's is going through that work now. So they're ahead of the evolution compared to Tottenham. But yeah, in terms of world-class players, there's none in the Arsenal team to talk of, I don't think. Probably Odegaard potentially, but Spurs have got some outstanding players.
Yeah, I'd take that Spurs squad over the Arsenal squad any day for now. I think Arsenal have got a great potential of how to develop that, but they need some heavy investment in the summer.
One thing I will say about Spurs this season is in the big games, they've actually gone toe-to-toe with some of the best teams and got results. Look at Arsenal, the City game, for instance.
True.
They were a better team and they threw it away by being, their naive selves that we're seeing several times over the year. This game was the same again. I just felt as though they were a little bit naive in their approach. You could kind of expected Spurs, a Conte team to sort of sit in quite organised and pick their moments to kind of really, attack Arsenal and damage them. And we saw that they were just literally brutal on the break. Well, and it's almost like Arteta just kind of doesn't want to change suit. He's wants to play his way. As we've seen a City team, Pep Guardiola, he only knows one way to play, and I think that really came back to sort of to haunt him. Really,
the good thing for them is I've just seen that this evening Gabriel and Ben White have both started, so that's huge for them because defensively they looked so poor against Spurs, didn't they? They were really missing those two. So who knows? Maybe that can be enough to get them through. I think Arsenal will finish fourth. I think they will, but I think Spurs are probably favourites looking at what happened in the North London derby, because you also wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal were a bit rocked this evening.
Yeah, I also think Spurs will be better equipped for Champions League football now next season than Arsenal. I fear Arsenal might be a bit of shell shock if they face some of the teams in the quality of the Champions League right now.
True, but it's obvious to everyone that Arsenal need to invest in some areas in the summer.
Yeah.
Whether they do or not is another story, because Arsenal's owners are so odd in that area. But they spent money last summer, they backed Arteta, and the players he brought in have worked. So if I'm the owners and he's got you top four, you've got to give him the money to do something with it. There's massive talk of Gabriel Jesus moving in, which I'm still not sold on personally. I think they could do better.
Really?
Yeah. Jesus to me, Jesus is Iniacho. He's a number 9 backup at Man City. I wonder how many goals. I don't know. Pick any Premier League striker, put him in that Man City side. They'd score 10 goals in a season. You put Danny Welbeck up front for Man City, and he stays fit all season.
I know what you mean. Iniacho in that Man City team was, looked a revelation at one point.
Yeah, but really we see his quality when he leaves City. He's not a bad forward. He's a good striker. He's a Premier League quality striker, of course he is. But he's not going to be Champions League top level starting every week, number 9. And I kind of think that might be the case with Jesus. He's got some talent. He's got some real talent. But I think his decision making is really poor. I think he's a really greedy forward. And the philosophy that Arsenal seem to have adopted and the team spirit that they've harnessed this season, I don't think Jesus suits that.
No. Okay. Well, I think it's a move that makes sense, really, on the face of it, purely because he's played for a team that's super successful. So from a mentality point of view, he's got a winning mentality. And I think Arsenal haven't got any experience of winning trophies in their squad. From what I remember, I can't remember any players that have lifted a trophy of note over the last few seasons.
No, neither.
Mentality-wise, he knows what it takes to win a trophy. Maybe he's going to level up the rest of the team with that mentality. Is he good enough as a striker? I don't think anyone knows yet, do they? I don't think we've seen the best of him. And I think every time there's been a big clash between the top two, Chelsea and Liverpool, Man City and Liverpool, you've always commented, each of you, on why have they picked Jesus for this particular game, and it's usually because he's not a threat in this particular situation. So who knows?
I'm not sure.
But hey, that's all to look forward to for the final game of the season. It's exciting, it's tense. Our teams in particular have got nothing to play for, but every other element is still riding on the final game as we speak. There's still a few games to play midweek, games in hand that have got to be caught up on, which still yet may change the landscape of the Premier League table. So it might be done and dusted by next weekend, but I hope it's not. Just for the spectacle, I hope it's not. But it just makes next week's podcast that little bit more tasty, I think you'll agree. So stay tuned. We'll be on socials as well. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. We will be sort of commenting regularly, really, hopefully, about the things that are going on over the next week. You'll hear from either one of us on that platform. But yeah, until then, guys, I can't wait to speak to you next time around. I hope you're all with me next Monday for the roundup of the season and the roundup of the final day. Are you going to both join me for that?
Yeah, 100%. I can't believe how quick it's come around, to be honest. End of the season already.
It feels mad that we're talking about the Euros so long ago. So coming up to a year now, and that still feels quite fresh, doesn't it?
Yeah, mental.
But in the meantime, though, guys, thank you again for joining us. Good to have the three of us back. I like the dialogue when it's the three of us. It's always nice to hear three different points of view. So, yeah, interesting times. And thank you for your time, guys. Thank you for watching again. Please hit like and subscribe if you do get the chance on YouTube, or hit a follow on whichever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That really does help the channel grow for the future. But until then, thank you, guys. See you soon. Take care.
Yeah.